Good afternoon. You're with the Economic Times, and we have something very important to discuss today. Well, in these difficult times and in the rapidly changing world, it has been like that for over several months now. Everything seems to have changed in the last 18 months or so. Businesses are having to find new ways of working. In manufacturing organization, production shifts have had to be managed like never before. The workforce, which was shut out of manufacturing units, particularly if it was classified as something which was non-essential, is now more than getting back to work, as, of course, everyone's keeping an eye on the vaccination progress as well. But there are a number of issues that need to be raised, spoken about. How do you manage the workforce at a time like this? While managing them in the context of today, managing them is a broad term actually, but companies need to optimize the workforce to ensure that they can make the best of the situation. Well, it doesn't end there really. There are some companies which have very specific need for their workforce that needs to be discussed as well. And these could be specific sectors as well. So if you're a company which has manufacturing operations across various locations, you wouldn't want to miss this discussion. You wouldn't want to be away from this. You would want to be glued on to this conversation. Over the next 90 minutes, we'll discuss the challenges that organizations have to face, and that challenge, if they can successfully meet that, it ensures adaptability, flexibility, and safety of their employees. So how can companies optimize employee costs, manage compliances, and improve productivity? Now that's quite a mouthful in one sentence. Let me just repeat it, just to drive home the point. How can companies optimize employee costs, manage compliances, and improve productivity? It's not very easy to do that, but there's a group of experts who's joining me now to talk about that, and they are very experienced people who will be joining for this discussion. Sudhakar Rao Desai, CEO at Imami Agrotech. Dr. Mahesh Bhalgat, he's CEO at Syngene. Dinesh Agrawal, Joint Managing Director, Panasonic Life Solutions. Abhay Srivastav, President Operations at Mankind Pharma. Chandrasekhar S., he's Business Head Spices at Olam Agro. And Sumit Doshi, Senior Director and Country Manager of India at UKG. They're all joining. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking out the time. Let me just give us a broad sense of what all we'll be talking over the next 90 minutes. We'll first, of course, request Sumit Doshi to do a context setting and give a broad picture of what we'll be discussing. In a little while, we'll also begin the conversations with all the experts. And for the audience, at about 4:40 or so, we'll expect more and more of your questions to come in, and we'll take some of those questions to the experts so that you can get your answers from the experts. So let me first invite Mr. Sumit Doshi to set the context for the discussion. Sumit, if you can explain what are some of those challenges being faced by companies, and well, I hope there are easy answers to that.
Absolutely, and thanks Ashutosh, first of all, for having me here, and thanks for it's a great panel here, and I am honored to be part of this panel. So I think you already set it up extremely well in terms of the discussion that we are going to have today, but I'd just like to extend on that a little bit. I think you, as you ended what you were saying, it's what are companies doing about managing people costs, improving productivity and compliance, right? While that's not a new requirement for manufacturing organizations, the last 16-18 months have dramatically changed the way organizations need to manage their employees, and from two broad areas, from two broad directions, if you may want to look at it. The first and foremost has been it is imperative on us as an organization to be able to take care of my employee safety. And in the manufacturing organizations, there was no flexibility for me to have employees working from home, right? So organizations started looking at and while I may use some terminologies here, but organizations started looking at how they could manage the journey of the employee from home to home, right? That was a big shift. An employee was afraid to leave his home. So how do I get him out of the home, get him to the factory, make him productive, keep him safe, and then bring him back? So that was one variable. And home to home at times did not mean his home that he was living in. All of a sudden that person left his place and moved somewhere else, and manufacturing companies faced the brunt of it. So that was one angle about managing employee safety, bringing them back to work safely, and yet delivering my production targets, right? That While that was on one side, on the second side, what also happened was, because of the pandemic, the buying behavior of the consumer changed dramatically. Now, how does that translate in a manufacturing organization? And I'm sure some of the experts here will talk about it more. But when you look at the buying behavior of your end consumer changing, it has a direct impact on what your production is, which means, and that planning cycle actually shortened is what we've seen, right? Because the planning cycle actually shortened for organizations. They're planning to get their employees in against your production plan shortened, and that meant that organizations needed to be more agile in terms of managing their employees. So that was the production side variable, and then there was an employee side variable which was keeping them safe. These two variables have come in and impacted manufacturing organizations, especially. We work with a lot of manufacturing customers, and we've seen these two variables coming in and having an impact. And what have organizations done to really manage this better? And organizations who kind of, I'm not sure how many have cracked this code, but whoever has cracked this code better than someone else, I think will thrive better, is the way we see it. And that's, I think, in an essence, it really boils down to how well you're managing your employees, your workforce, so that you can get the best out of your organization, out of your employees, to deliver, to give the best to your consumer, right? And connected to that is also a whole lot of digitization and technology enhancements that organizations have looked at when it comes to managing your manufacturing workforce. So that will be an area that we'd love to hear from the esteemed co-panelists. And I think that's broadly the context that I'd like to talk about.
Okay, so that's quite an interesting change that has been happening. And indeed, companies are having their own ways of addressing some of that change that has been happening. Okay, let's start the conversation then. My first question, let's get the first question. And here's what I'd like to understand. Panasonic, very well-known Japanese brand, India is a large business, their manufacturing operations. Let me ask this question too and address it for particularly that sector, and ask Dinesh Agarwal for that. Dinesh, how do you see that for your company and for your sector? What impact do you expect the pandemic to have? Any long-term impact on the workforce and the related activities?
Yeah, thanks, Ashutosh. I think that's a very broad question. So let me try and answer it from different perspectives. So, obviously, these 18 months, we have learned a lot. And I'm saying this in a positive tone because I think one thing we have learned is that while money and coercion can be reasons for achievement, but I think a common sense of purpose is a bigger reason. And we saw this coming up, with our workers across the factories. So we have about 8,000 workers across our factories in Gujarat and in Uttarakhand. And, obviously we had to educate them because many of them are not highly educated. So they are, especially in the assembly operations. So a lot of education, a lot of setting up of SOPs went into ensuring that there is no, close physical contact. We also took the initiative of going up to their villages. So they come from about 15 villages across, Haridwar, Roorkee, Saharanpur, neighboring belts, and in Valsad. So we did some initiatives at their villages as well in terms of education, some written material, in Hindi and Gujarati. So there was a constant education which was happening, that what is COVID and how it has to be prevented at work and at homes. Obviously, we went a step forward and gave them sanitizers as well, apart from masks, so that they use it without any holdback. Right. But I think it was amazing the way they picked up those processes, and they have been followed right from that initial 1 week till date. Those processes are being followed. It might look very simple, but when let's say 3,500, 4,000 workers come out of the factory, get onto their vehicles, whether it's buses or let's say the Vikrams or three-wheelers, it could be chaos. Now, how do you control them and not let them rush out? How do you ensure that those vehicles are sanitized before the workers get into them? So these are the simple things that they learn to follow. We obviously erected barriers in the assembly stations so that no two workers get exposed. We gave them assurance that if they have slightest symptoms of whatever kind, even a cold, they could stay home and they'll get paid. So all of this helped, and I'm actually very proud to say that in a total company of about 9,700 people, we had about 66 cases, out of which more than 50% were actually from non-manufacturing activities, from sales and others. So that has been our experience as far as the manufacturing is concerned. On the logistics side, supply chain side, of course, we had similar constraints because the rules were changing every day in terms of timings and open, not open. So we had to get the materials to the distribution markets. So while in the first phase the distribution markets were closed physically for a long period, in the second phase they were again going through a whole cycle of opening, not opening, few hours opening, and our stockists wanted the material. And so again we innovated in terms of using small lot delivery, using hand carts, delivering a small amount of material sometimes to their homes, from where they would carry in their private cars. So various ways of ensuring that there's no stock out in with our channel partners. That happened. And on the sales side, I think apart from the whatever activity happened in the field, I think this has been a great experience for us in terms of engagement with the customer. In our business, it is not only the end customer, but there's a whole lot of people who influence his or her purchase. So these could be the electricians, the architects, the interior designers, the electrical consultants. We thought that's going to suffer, but it actually was amazing because we could engage more. There was more time on hand, and the time was being more productively used. So we engaged in many seminars, many technical seminars, product introductions. We've done product launches, during this period. And I think we are going to adopt this model forever, in terms of engaging with the customers and the specifiers. So that's very broad.
That's quite a statement to make. Adopt this model forever. That's quite a learning and quite a statement to make. Okay, let me get Sudhakar Desai here from Imami Agrotech. Sudhakar, some of your experiences, if you could explain, and some of the challenges you face. What can other companies also learn from you, the smaller companies particularly? You're on mute, Sudhakar, so you'll have to just unmute yourself, please.
Thanks, Ashutosh. Yeah, basically, we are in agri-business, edible oil business, and which is basically essential commodity. And we are in the business where we have to move about 5,000 tons of material a day. So COVID, when it struck, I mean, obviously it was new for everybody. It created a great uncertainty when we faced it, because imagine we have to buy from the market yards. There are a lot of ships that are arriving from Argentina, Malaysia, Indonesia. You're not clear about the customs clearances. So a lot of challenges were there. But I would just take a few minutes on, where do we stand now and what were these key challenges.
Sure.
Basically, it was the time when everything was unclear, but only one thing was clear, that demand is certain. But we were not knowing whether it is the demand from the HoReCa, or is it the household demand, is it the consumer demand? Because basically COVID has changed everything about the way the consumer buys, where he buys, which SKU he buys, and in what quantum. And that has got a lot of ramifications in the manufacturing processes and the planning. Like typically we used to do 1 plus 2 months because of the lead time of imports is huge, but all that has changed and we were to go into weekly basis. So I've learned a few things. One is it landed us in the inescapable trilemma of people safety, cash, and customer retention. And I also realized that the revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is the king. I'll tell you why. Suddenly we realized that organization, I remember prior to COVID, hardly about 7 to 8 people in an organization of, let's say, a total of 4,000 people. We got about 3,500 workforce. 7, 8 people used to have virtual meetings. Within about 5 days, we had 800 people quickly on Teams organizing themselves into in the lockdown period, trying to manage the supply chain. I realized that the incoming raw material, managing the labor force, supply chain, and the cash is the most critical aspect which you should start seeing it daily without losing the big picture. There was supply chain risk, there is the labor shortages. We had to obviously, like many other companies, had to take care of safety, organize vehicles, get the passes, and also over a period of time try to do the attend to the productivity related issues. On the shop floor, suddenly you realize that you have to produce the same amount of material and pack and dispatch with 50% of labor force. We never thought that on these lines that we can still make it happen. So that raised a lot of questions about automation, work simplification, business process re-engineering. How do you automate many things? So I think for everything we needed to have a plan B at the factories. For example, we were at the thick of COVID. We had a refinery up and coming under project stage at Kandla. We had to literally house about 700 people within the factory itself for 2 months, just because we didn't want to leave them. You know how the situation was at that time. And then I'm happy to say we finished the 3,000 ton per day refinery capacity during the COVID.
Oops, looks like you've again gone on mute by mistake.
Yeah, sorry about that. So basically, we had to make a 3,000 refinery up and running during COVID by managing the labor situation itself. So, we had to, at the manufacturing level, we had to do the automation. So we have embarked on automatic retrieval system so that we can manage with lesser number of manpower, ability to load, ability to dispatch. So these were the key learnings. And in a nutshell, I think we learned. I think COVID was a big teacher. We learned so many new ways of attending to the same task of magnitude. Less is better kind of a thing. So
Okay.
we had to manage all this. At the same time, it was like a grounded aeroplane that halted and slowed down. So you could repair many things. For example, we have implemented SAP systems. We did the whole lot of process re-engineering. So all this we could take up thanks to COVID.
Okay. Okay, let me
Some
get
benefits that percolated here.
And let me get in the pharma companies, because there are some, as I mentioned in the introduction, there are some challenges which are very unique to them. So we have Mankind Pharma and Syngene here. Let's first go across to Mankind Pharma. Okay, let's get Dr. Mahesh Bhalga to talk about that. Mahesh, the challenges faced by a workforce which is prone to working or habituated with working in shifts, and then suddenly you face a situation like that where getting them in or getting them out was a challenge. How did you address that issue?
So first of all, thank you, Ashu. Thanks for inviting me for this panel, and I think it's a very interesting discussion, right on the back of what Mr. Desai just mentioned, what Sudhakar mentioned, which is in many ways, COVID has been a big teacher for us, right? And we celebrated Teachers' Day across the country yesterday. Frankly, for us in the pharma business, and I'll just mention, Syngene is actually a very diversified company. We are a CRO CDMO that provides research, development, and manufacturing services to all kinds of pharma, biotech, and other companies beyond. What that does is actually creates a even more interesting challenge for us, because we have workforce that is used to the shift-based working by being in manufacturing. But then we also have a workforce that is an R&D workforce that is actually not used to a shift-based working, but they just work what we call as a general shift. We had to adapt our organization to, one, make sure that the shift-based working patterns can be maintained. And we are located in Bangalore at the Tamil Nadu Bangalore border. And we have had to worry about how do you maintain people's ability to flexibly move across state borders when different states may have different requirements in terms of testing, in terms of movement, curfew times, and so on and so forth. So that was one complexity that we had to address, for which we started looking for solutions more locally. Trying to find places where we can house our staff, which did not have to go too far off from the factory borders and be easily available. Also had to then adapt to to reduce density on site, had to adapt to get our R&D workforce to start working in shifts, so that you don't have the same amount of people working in the same square footage of area as you normally did. On top of that, then we had to create almost 10 additional cafeterias on site, which are makeshift cafeterias, so that you can reduce again the density of staff by creating zones in which you can now manage, if you had a positive incident, to only isolate that zone and keep the rest of the factory, keep the rest of the environment working. So makeshift cafeterias being set up, the shift working schedules being brought in, additional local stay authorizations and local stay accommodations that were done. Plus, of course, providing almost a customized transportation approach to all of our staff were some of the things that were logistically just a challenge to do, but somehow our team amazingly well did it enough. At one point of time, we thought we were probably running a transport company than actually running a pharmaceutical business. And that's the nature of how we've moved into this.
Yeah.
One other component that I wanted to mention specifically from an employee safety and making things work properly was, it was very important for us to make sure that we were very quick on contact tracing. So we actually had a procedure that we wrote down on what would happen when we had the first positive case identified on site, because we knew it was only a matter of time that was going to happen, create a lot of panic, and therefore not just manage the panic, but also manage the spread of that so that we have minimum number of people impacted. So we created a microsite that would have all the contact tracing details of any positive cases identified, so that anybody who did need to go into quarantine isolation was quickly communicated that you need to be in quarantine, you need to be isolated, and therefore reduce spread. What of course helped, being in the pharma business, is we were actually able to put a lot of our medical and our pharmaceutical expertise to work. We set up an RT-PCR lab on our site itself. Thanks to ICMR and thanks to NABL, these organizations were able to accredit us very, very rapidly, so that we became an authorized RT-PCR testing facility that could not only start testing our own employees, but also start testing the community around us and overall serve the state of Karnataka.
Got it.
So that was something that additionally helped, because every time we had a positive or we had an incidence, we would be able to test them very, very rapidly. We, of course, took that further, and we've now put in place a program for several months now where we routinely test all of our staff coming into the campuses on a very routine basis, weekly or bi-weekly. Plus, of course, everybody who's visitors coming on site are also tested, so that the campus now acts as a bubble in which everybody feels a lot more secure, because of knowing the number of COVID cases being very, very low as compared to the outside environment.
Okay.
In addition, we were able to go ahead and get our pharmaceutical expertise put to work with the regulators. And I think I have to give a big kudos to the overall regulatory system in India that has also stepped up in a big way to make sure we combat this challenging times. We got approval for remdesivir manufacturing, one through the compulsory license, to the licensing approach that we were able to take with Gilead, but then also getting the approval from our local regulatory authorities to put remdesivir on the market. Along with that, we've also been able to put other testing solutions, reagents for vaccine research, vaccine manufacturing, and help the overall community from this perspective. What that has done from an employee perspective is it has, one, given a confidence to employees coming on site that they're coming into a very safe environment. Second, given a sense of purpose, saying that we are actually serving not just the needs of the company, but the needs of the pandemic. And then the third is actually making sure that they became proponents of speaking out on vaccine hesitancy, vaccine related challenges, and so on. And frankly, of course, all of this is only possible because of the amazing use of technology, right? We were able to bring in a lot of virtual tours, audits that have been conducted by regulatory authorities through virtual cameras, and our learning systems and our paperless solutions that we've implemented.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that part, because that's a very important part as well. And because we are speaking around the needs of the pharmaceutical industry, let me get Abhay Srivastav from Mankind Pharma. Abhay, so much, and people think you're only getting medicines and you're working in the pharmaceutical sector. You're almost doing everything else in addition to that. What was the challenge that you faced? If you could focus only on the challenges that you faced in making sure that this could happen without too much of a problem for the people managing the plant operations.
Okay, thanks Ashutosh for inviting me. The first, the biggest challenge which we found within the 3 days when the lockdown was announced was what is the definition of essential service. And we also felt that as soon as the definition was been given by the Home Ministry, but how it went up to the state and to the local authorities was a big gap. We saw a big gap. Then that was the biggest challenge, I would say. The second challenge was we also during our second wave, we could also make it out that COVID is going to stay, because it will keep on mutating and it will keep on coming. So it is going to stay. The third challenge is that the humans, you cannot keep them binded. So they are social animals. They will try to meet each and every people, and it's very difficult to discipline and contain themselves. So what we did is that we tried to collaborate with the local bodies and local industries, because we felt that the ecosystem from where they are coming is very important. So we collaborated on a national level as well as on the local level, where we can make some common good practices for the employees to come, because 2/3 of their time they are in this ecosystem and they are only 1/3 at in the plant. So keeping them in discipline was the biggest challenge, and to ensure that, what we also did, that we put some we used the technology. We started GPS tracking them so that they don't go into some kind of contaminated zone or declared contaminated or containment zone. And we exhibited a very strong gate entry control, right? So that the wrong person don't come. So if a person has gone on leave and is coming back, so we ensure that he doesn't directly go inside. We also have our own RT-PCR company, testing company. So RT-PCR tests were being done very frequently. So screening was the biggest challenge, and screening, there were certain governments who were not allowing screening at the rate we wanted. So that was another challenge. And The other challenge was that uh, the understanding between the government with respect to the rules and policy. So what we did, that the collaboration which we created helped us in convincing the government, making some policy in and around smooth functioning of the company or the pharmaceutical industries. And Department of Pharmaceuticals have come a long way, and they have gone extra mile to help a pharmaceutical company going. Otherwise, there would have been a shortage of drug.
Okay, so we've understood, it's pretty established that there was a challenge, of course, everyone knows that, but it also raises a number of important questions on how to manage that. Let me now toss it to Chandrasekhar S. From Olam Agro on what some of those challenges were. Chandrasekhar, as you know, Olam, which runs several plants, what was the company doing to address, typically the losses that happen in terms of output when you're even with a depleted workforce, you're handing over, one shift is handing over to the next, the first hour productivity loss, as they say?
Yeah, thanks. So if you look at Olam, we run multiple factories across different products. So we would have a cashew factory, which has got a lot of labor, very labor intensive. And some of the other manufacturing units like sugar, where people would be staying within the compound or a complex or a residential colony. So you're in a kind of a cocoon or the bubble. And you have other factories where people would be coming in and going out. So we had different kinds of people coming in and going out. So each of the units had to be looked at differently and in terms of managing the people around it. The first wave, if you typically look at it, or if I'm not called the first wave, but the first phase between the March to May of 2020, there was a lot of novelty on COVID and also fear. In 2021, when you switch over to 2021, the novelty wore out, the fatigue set in. The continuous lockdowns and I think and the fear actually was out. So you had fear in 2020. The fear was kind of out because people had actually started traveling by October, November, December of 2020 when the cases started depleting, and all of us felt that was the end of it. So things started getting back to normalcy again. Then when you had the wave, if you look at productivity and production, it did definitely get impacted. One. Let's say in our cashew industry, where we have more than 2,000 people coming to work on a daily basis, a lot of them are uneducated people coming in from the nearby locations. Mobility was an issue. The public transport wasn't really working, so you had to organize enough and more vehicles to get them. There was always the fear or the fatigue coming in, and if somebody in the village had a COVID, the local authorities were kind of quarantining the whole village or putting blockades on the street, which led to people not really coming to work. So you had definitely challenges of not having enough people. So we had to reduce the number of lines or the quantity which we were processing. In facilities which were running 24/7, we typically would do a running handover where shift A would hand it over to shift B and shift B would hand it over to C, which we couldn't do, because we wouldn't want to have a shift A and B coming in contact. So we had to compulsorily stop the production, let's say at 15 or 20 minutes before the shift closure, let the plant get sanitized. Then the shift B would take over 15, 20 minutes later, which meant additional cost and activity, but at least it led to productivity not getting impacted in a big way. So we had to innovate around the processes, what we could do. It led to productivity loss, but from the ratio of 0 to 1, if you're at 0.8 or 0.85, you're still better off. So that's where we kind of had to do an innovation to see how we could salvage and move forward.
Okay, so Dakar, what are, the people, the challenge of having people, the systems, there is one part which is systems and which is other, the materials and the systems and the machinery. And here we're talking people. What are some of those challenges that, how do you focus on manpower and ensuring that that variable, the losses that are happening there, can be minimized? Sudhakar.
I think it's a very interesting question, Ashutosh. There's a lot about it. But if I have to start somewhere, I think you realize that the people are the key. People are the key of the whole organization. Not only internal people, but even external. You can't see them, you can't meet them. You still have to influence them. You still have to control them. You still have to manage the workforce, manufacturing, and supply chain. But the biggest thing is that the coordination, because I can just tell you that let's say 500 crores of or 600 crores of 10 days of dispatches or a sales opportunity can be lost just because one sealant or one particular part that goes into packaging is missing. So if you had to manage not only the entire supply chain, but also the vendors, and if required, even the people related in the vendor organizations, are they taking enough precautions? Because if they shut down their factory, small one, your huge factory can be shut down. But coming back to people, I think it was all about alignment and focus and the trial and error, and also provide the requisite motivation. When people are balancing between work and family health and their own health, I think the organizations, the biggest quality that should come to the forefront is the empathy. I can tell you personally, I spoke to every COVID affected employee in the organization, irrespective of whether he's a workforce or a manager or whoever, including having just a few minutes conversation with the family. So I see this as something, an opportunity to involve people into your own goal, right? Second, you have to recognize who are the COVID champions within your organization, and you need to also have a structured program also to say involve their family members, involve what they need. These are not the times where you would typically, do talent skilling and this and that. This was a different kind of approach you would have to the manpower. Number three, I think you would have to have a conversation daily in a structured way, so that people will tell you, not only your direct report functional heads, departmental heads, but the people down the line and the entire organization. There are three things that you were to do. What is working well today? What is working well for this week and what is scalable? What is not working and how can I repair and innovate? And number three, what do I do better right now? So if you put these buckets in the organization, then what happens, at least I realize, the R&D is no longer about the product development. R&D meant that in supply chain, in the packaging floor, in the loading operations, in the weighbridge operations, in the dispatches, in every aspect of it, there was an innovation that was required, and that required people to be motivated enough. Now you now come to the second part of your question. What is at stake? I think there was a huge thing at stake. Frankly, when it all started, we didn't realize that the normalcy of sales and purchases and collections would happen. A lot of good things have happened. But if the capacity, I don't know about many other industries, but edible oil industry or agri-business are a very thin margin business. 2, 3 very huge enterprise risks will come into place. If, for example, if your capacity drops by even 20-30% in a thin margin business, your business viability can be under question, right? So there is a minimum scale of operations that you needed to run, irrespective of whatever be the workforce challenges. So this is number one. Number two, we learned four things, I would just say to sum up. Managing price risk, supply chain risk, and the cash risk were the three biggest elements of running an organization. Second is cost control across the organization. When the margins and the volumes are under pressure, it required that you needed to question every element of it, like packaging innovation, supply chain innovation. Cost control was like the mantra. And then at the end of the day, people based, you needed to keep two things in place. One is the speed and energy. Speed is not absolute speed, but absolute speed was not possible when everything was getting reset. You have to be,
Agility.
your related to
Agility.
competition, you have to be faster, right? So speed
Yeah.
and energy, and encourage innovation across all the organization. At the end of the day, keep people engaged, keep them focused, and then work on all this mission. If you don't get some of these things, I think there was without these things, I think the organization can really fall apart, and in that panic situation, I think these are the things that at least I believe that we did well, and many companies must have done well in this aspect, and that is the mantra during this
Sure,
period.
sure. So let me also just remind there are quite a few people who are watching us, and if you have any questions, just put them down in the Q&A tab that you see, and we will take those questions, and the experts will answer those questions from you. Of course, it has to be around the topic that we are discussing today. So because you spoke of, Sudhakar, of all the challenges, let me go across to Sumit there. Sumit, so many challenges thrown up. How does tech give us an opportunity to address some, or perhaps everyone would love to hear all those challenges? Can that be addressed?
Absolutely, Ashutosh, and I think it's absolutely wonderful to hear the experiences of the panelists and some of the stuff that they've done. And I think managing the workforce traditionally, if one were to look at the resources that a manufacturing organization has, one way to look at it is I've got 4 M's as resources. I have money, I have machine, I have material, and I have manpower. Right. So these are the 4 resources which a manufacturing organization uses to sort of manage their ops. Traditionally, always the only resource that had its own mind, right, was the manpower. So even if you optimized machine and materials, manpower would always throw a spanner in your plans potentially to have an optimized output. With COVID coming in, it actually added another element of complexity to it. And I think, as Sudhakar Rao especially mentioned, or many other panelists also have mentioned, the focus also shifted, not just shifted, the focus also shifted to managing the experience of the employee, right? Now, what does experience of an employee mean when it's a blue-collar employee or a contract worker? For example, can I give a blue-collar employee the tools, say through mobility, where an employee can actually go ahead and look at his shift, and because of situations around his home or the situation in his family because of COVID or what have you, he can go ahead and decide which shift he wants, or decide to say, I want to swap the shift with someone else. So can I as an employee be given an experience right down to the last mile, where I can potentially make these small changes to my work, yet and that is reflected back to the operations manager, who can then take corrective actions, where the system, through an artificial intelligence technology like artificial intelligence, can guide the manager saying, okay, if this person is not available, maybe this person is available, and so on and so forth, right? So this is a direction that we've seen a lot of our customers moving into, where it's not just about manpower planning and deploying them on the floor. Yes, that's one of the things that needs to be done. But how do you do that in an empathetic manner? And how can technology help you make it more empathetic, where you can drive the experience of an employee? And this point, if I may elaborate a few more seconds on this, traditionally, there are companies who've even done shift schedules for their employees, which lasted the whole year and were static, never changed, right? I know companies who have shift schedules that last 6 months and 1 year also. But today, that is not possible. So that planning window has come down dramatically. The only way you can manage that complexity, that planning, is through usage of technology, where you have this entire skill set available in one place, and you can make those real-time changes that you want to. So that's where planning and engagement go together. They somehow seem two contradictory things, but employee engagement and planning of your workforce actually need to come in together, which is where technology really helps. Once you've had your plan in place, the other area that a technology also helps is execution, which I think Mahesh spoke quite a bit about, and other panelists also did. For example, in the current time, it was the density of workforce that we had to manage, right? So if I had to do a staggered shift of my employees, I cannot simply go ahead and say that of my 100 employees, 50x, random 50 will come in shift 1 and random 50 will come in shift 2, right? I have to figure out which teams work together, which skills work together. Now, that one way of doing that is manual. And yes, manually, everyone has done it. A easier, better, more productive way is where you have technology that can bring it all together, so that it can give you in one fell swoop a very simple view saying, okay, if you have to do a 30% split, 50%, 70% of your workforce, this is your best combination of workforce that needs to come in, right? Once you have that, then on the floor, again, panelists talked about things like contact tracing and related technologies, very critical to manage the safety and hygiene of my employees. And of course, then eventually, how do I track compliance as well? I mean, there are two pharma panelists here. They are subject to more compliance than I think any other industry on the planet, perhaps. FDA compliance, social compliance, what have you. But every industry is subject to a lot of compliance as well. And how can you manage your costs, drive your productivity, but at the same time be able to manage some of these compliances which are also only increasing by the day, right? Whether it was COVID related compliance, or I think for all the leaders here, their HR heads would be today thinking, how do I take care of the labor code that is set to go live potentially on 1st of October? And what are the challenges that me as a company will face? How will my costs go up, right? Those are compliance issues also. Probably the costs will go up, but will that, how do I use technology to manage all of this? Are areas that we are working with a lot of our customers to help them be more productive and of course deliver better to their customers. End of the day, that's the objective.
Okay, let's get Dinesh Agarwal to answer this question. There's a question that's come up from one of the people who put it, and here's the question, Dinesh. This says, in current unprecedented situation, one side we are focusing on cost cutting, where people have a risk of job loss, and the other side, the question is on the manpower. Motivation to increase productivity, that's the point. How do we manage both? If you can share your answer, Dinesh.
Yeah, good question, and I think it's a challenge. So while during this period, companies have faced headwinds. They've not sold as much as they would have in the normal times. But the fact remains, India is a growing economy, and the fact remains that every product, every service which is being offered will have a growth potential. Now, the question is that can a company take an advantage of that in the next 3, 5, 10 years? So as far as Panasonic, we are concerned, we obviously looking at the country very, very optimistically. And we continue to grow our operations. We continue to add businesses, grow our operations. But will we add manpower? Obviously, it will be a calculated addition of manpower, because we have our internal productivity norms across functions. So we will, scale up, keeping those in mind, and of course with the technology intervention. So to me, productivity enhancement, I think, is a factor of many things, because while there are measurable skills, or measurable jobs, like let's say for example, production is a very, very measurable job. Maybe related functions like maintenance is a measurable job, or sales is a measurable job. But then there are many other functions in a company which are not so measurable, right? So how do you ensure the increase in productivity of each of these functions? Because an organization cannot grow if it is skewed. That means on one hand, you keep your production costs coming down, productivity increasing, sales increasing, but then there's an overhead of head office or sales branches which keeps getting loaded. And this is one of the challenges, that we believe, even companies similar to us would have. And this would be perhaps a question to Sumit, that one of the questions during this period of 18 months we have had is, what has been the productivity of our employees who are not on the shop floor, who are not on the field, who have not achieved their quantified target? How do you make it more objective? How do we say that, whether this period was productive, not productive, was it same, was it better? And this classical question of that, should we retain this model? Should we retain a hybrid model? We don't know. So currently we have a feeling that since we don't have objective ways of measuring that, it's better that all those people come back to the office and start working. At least, we see them and we hope that they're working. So productivity enhancement is a factor of what I would say is the motivation to achieve the end objective. I think that's certainly the biggest motivator to me. As I mentioned at the beginning, what I have seen over the years is that you can give money, you can give incentives, you can have a tight monitoring in the organization, a strict organization, but all of that doesn't work. What works is a single-minded pursuit of a goal. If that goal is clear, if it is reiterated, on a continuous basis, more importantly, if the people believe in it, right, the productivity enhancement happens on its own. It has to be spoken in different languages at different people, whether it's workers, sales executives, or the managers. But if they're clear where we are going, where the direction in which the company is headed towards, the productivity enhancement, happens on its own. And of course, it has to be demonstrated as well. You can't be preaching something and not doing it. So that's I think what I would like to say. Yeah.
Okay. Let's also, since Sumit mentioned about some of the compliances that pharmaceutical companies, they have a challenge. And let's go across and get Abhay Srivastava to answer this question. Abhay, given the kind of compliances that happen with the pharmaceutical companies, what are some of those regular audits that are needed, some of those challenges that are faced? How does a pharmaceutical company ensure in the current environment that it can be handled smoothly?
So traditionally, all the audits or the regulatory audits were physical. And suddenly this COVID thing came in and the people were not able to come and physically visit. And there was a lot of pressure from the regulators as well to get the medicine delivered from India, because India being the pharmacy for the world. Mm-hmm. So there was a need of urgency, and there was a need that the audits needs to be conducted, and there is a free flow of this medicine coming into their country as well as in India as well. Mm-hmm. As rightly pointed out by Mr. Mahesh, that even in the Indian government for their internal consumptions were giving faster approvals. Mm-hmm. So the biggest challenge was that the physical audits were not possible. So then the virtual thing came in and the virtual audit started. And mm-hmm. for virtual audit, there were a lot of deliberation between the industry, between the regulator, as well as the different bodies. So how it needs to be conducted and what is the legal aspect of such audits and all. I think the European and the other countries which recognizes the EU approvals, they took a faster leap and they started their virtual audit. US FDA took some time, but they also now are doing a virtual audit because they also now feel that a physical audit is sometimes very difficult. So only in case of warning letters, they are coming physically. Otherwise, for regular pre-approvals and routine audits, they are doing it through virtual.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, let's also include another question, because this is coming from one of the people who are watching. Here's a question, and this question I'd like Chandrasekhar to take if he can. And here goes the question from Arshad. Due to COVID, many traditional organizations which were reluctant to use tech freely. And since you were speaking, Abhay, I'd like to put this question. How do we see the industry changing in terms of using technology? What are the likely chances that post-COVID way of working, this way of working would stick? Chandrasekhar.
Yeah. So if you look at it, I think at a manufacturing level, definitely we are looking at, as Sumit mentioned, definitely tech is going to come into the business. It could be in terms of automation, it could be in terms of scheduling, better process controls, where we could reduce intervention of people as well as reduce, let's say, even if people are there, if things are going to get automated, I think the way forward is definitely, I see that there is going to be more and more automation coming in. And even, let's say, when there are people-to-people interactions, let's say we have to work with our customers for a product development, go visit our customers. So moving beyond just the manufacturing part, moving into the front-end part, things have definitely evolved there as well. So today, I see that possibly a day travel, let's say traveling from Mumbai to Delhi for a meeting for an hour or so, possibly I think is going to be a thing of past. People will possibly connect like this, talk and be done with the call rather than travel for a meeting. So things have definitely moved forward. Very basic level of tech, which is going to be these Zoom calls or these telecalls. Moving beyond, I think manufacturing is definitely going to see a lot more automation. People, I would see even that where people are not essential in the work, definitely we're going to have a hybrid model. Some of the organizations have already started it and definitely are looking at alternatives where we don't need people to come in daily to work. You're going to have a hybrid model where some of them would come on a particular day, some would be on another day. So I think for sure the world has completely changed. We not sure whether would we go back 100% to the normalcy or going back to the normal, one of the questions which I was asked. I doubt whether we would go back to normal, being normal. The new normal would be where you create a hybrid.
Okay, but let's ask Mahesh as well. Mahesh, and I'd want brief answers, maybe pointers. What are some of those key changes that you see and where technology has a bigger role now for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think, in a regulated industry like ours, everything that we do has to be written down. Everything that we perform on the manufacturing floor has to be written down. What that leads to is a lot of documentation. So we have what's called as a batch record when a batch is produced, and that batch record can go into thousands of pages. One of the things that I see is going to change is now we are generating those batch records electronically. What that does is actually reviewing those hundreds or thousands of pages now becomes a matter of minutes, because anything that's an exception is flagged up. Everything that's normal is doesn't even need to be reviewed. So this is one of the examples of how we are changing the utilization of technology, and this is something that will certainly go forward. The other bit, again, because of a compliance-based organization that we are on, and we are playing such a critical role in human life-saving drugs that we produce, it's also about how well you train your staff to be on the floor. And that training is also changing. One, we are of course going to paperless ways of working where training records are all paperless, making audits a lot faster. The second is also with regards to how you utilize technology for training. So using AR, VR based approaches, training becomes a lot more easier and effective. These are some of the examples that I can offer on how we will see things changing in the ways going forward for an industry like ours, all coming from COVID times and supported by technology solution providers like UKG and others.
Abhay, quick few pointers that you think which will stand out in the coming years and make a very definitive impact. Abhay, can you hear us? Looks like we lost. Okay, let's ask Dinesh there because you want to mention something. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think this period actually has broken many of the thought processes because perhaps there was no alternative. I can give you an example of how we have done vendor evaluation, the entire shop floor evaluation. 2 vendors in India, 1 in China, all remotely, right? And because there is technology available now, you could actually move into the shop floor, take the camera to the equipment, take the camera to the reports which are being generated in the laboratories there. So see on a real-time basis that no data is being fudged, right? If the vendor is talking about something, he's doing it, and then showing the report to you. So we've done vendor approvals, we've done product design approvals, with the kind of softwares that are available. You can actually do a 3D rendition, of products and then hold a meeting of cross-function and approve the product designs, and then make changes, send it back. And all of this is happening, remotely. I mean, virtually. We've done, so we launched kitchens, modular kitchens about 2 years ago. In this period, we've not had a loss of sale Because typically you would expect a customer to, look at the designs and then, come to your showroom, validate those designs, or you email those designs. So we were able to, of course, email the designs. We were able to show a 3D rendition of the kitchen and get approvals from the customers to go ahead and manufacture the kitchen, get the advance money from them. And then, of course, I spoke about the training and webinars. And so that's the reason I mentioned that some of them have become so time efficient. And, I've spoken to a few architects and consultants myself. They see there's no reason why we should go back to the real world. Because you save time, we save time, right? You save money on travel, and the work is anyway happening. So this is where I think the technology intervention will change a lot of things, apart from, of course, on the shop floor, perhaps getting more automation, lesser physical contact and so on. So that to us is how technology intervention will happen for us. Yeah.
So Chandrasekhar, then the question is, how do you measure workplace productivity objectively? Because right now, let's face it, we are not yet ready for that. How do you go about that?
I think probably today would not be the time to assess as things are moving in from one paradigm, and there is a shift of the paradigm now and we are moving to the next stage. I think definitely how things will evolve definitely is that where we will look at developing new tools of measuring productivity in terms of how people are starting to work, what are the kind of contribution, how individuals would be working. Let's say if you're in a manufacturing setup, definitely it will be still the quantity or the production per person, the productivity, the manpower productivity, traditional tools which we will be using, because those would still be the ones which would be used to measure productivity. But let's say if you are moving towards other activities where people are involved, let's say in terms of documentation, in terms of finance and other areas, end of the day, what we would be quantifying then is the output. You would have to measure basis the output they're generating. If the individual, he or she, is able to deliver the appropriate results, what they are being given to, we have to develop those, the KRAs and the results which will have to be developed, have to be appropriately modified. And that's the process which many of the organizations are currently undergoing and doing, so that we are able to change and start measuring them in a way which is appropriate in terms of how they work. It's necessary.
Sure. So let's try and see if we can connect with Abhay and see if he can answer this. Abhay, internal changes, what do some of those internal changes that need to be made now so that we are ready for that objective assessment of the workflow, the productivity, and all those details?
Yeah. There are two things which are going uncertain, or they are not clear, or there is visibility is very poor: the supply side as well as the demand side, as far as the pharma is concerned, because the disease hasn't come. So there is the product mix which generally sells have also changed, and the supply, because even the vendors are having the similar kind of challenges to operate in COVID. So supply is also like distorted and the demand is also distorted. Now, there is a need, definitely a need of technology to bring clarity or to bring the visibility, and that is the only, I would say, the only way to improve for the future. And it is the right time, I would say, that we should have a kind of a roadmap for digitization on digitalization, so that such kind of roadblock or such kind of challenges don't interfere in the business much.
Okay. Mahesh, I'd also like to understand from you, in this rush for continuity, that is a challenge being faced by all kinds of businesses. Have some companies perhaps lost or lessen their focus on the bigger picture of the revenue and profit growth? Or is the board making sure that you don't forget that? That is primary, of course, but this has to be the focus for now, the continuity part that I spoke about.
No, you bring up a very good point, right? I mean, in all of the midst of the things that we are all having to deal with as management team members, which are the things that can be prioritized versus which of the things that can drop for some period of time? And after making sure that you have addressed your employee safety and employee comfort component of it, the most important component to address is the component around revenue, right? And for that, I think the thing that we have to all make sure we understand are the key contributors, which is now what the board is asking for, right? What are the metrics of productivity that can now stay, and what is going to be our new way of evaluating productivity? Frankly, evaluation of productivity from an units per employee perspective is so slowly be less and less important, because it's going to be a combination of machine and manpower that's going to be a component of your productivity calculations. And so making that transition so that you can now identify what is your top line that you should be at, not just based on the 1,000 employees that you have, but the 1,000 employees, but the 1,000 crores of investment that you did, is what's going to be the transition that we all have to make. And we're starting to ask those questions so that you can understand that you have the right return on revenue and make all of the right investment decisions. Now, in the pharma industry, of course, we have an additional dichotomy, right? We do investments from a compliance perspective because some of the upgradations and changes that we do are purely compliance based, but a lot of the investments that we do are also based on either increasing capacity or increasing capability, and those then have to be segregated out, and we're building those models as we go through in the entire industry, so that we can understand really where we stand in the new normal of where we use technology much more as an enabler than just as a nice to have, if you will.
Okay.
So that transition is coming.
Okay. Sudhakar, you had a question. Sorry, I seem to have missed it. If you can ask, please.
No, not a question. I just wanted to add in the whole talk about digitalization and technology, I just want to share that at least FMCG and product like this, there's a lot of an explosion of e-commerce. I mean, the way the consumer is behaving or the consumer trends, he would shift from SKU mix change, or start buying, given the population of the future, younger generation, there'll be more online. So I just want to mention that any organizational changes that you do in terms of understanding what were the permanent changes due to COVID, what are the temporary transient changes, and what are the possible outcomes of it, and how do you use technology to it. If I ask this sequencing of this question, I don't want to lose focus on which problem of the consumer are you trying to resolve. I think there is productivity measuring and all these issues are fine, but the consumer will decide what kind of a future organization you want to build. For example, people, for example, in 50%, 60% of the people will be working remotely. How do you reconfigure your skill set to suit the future consumer needs? Maybe they can work on different projects. There is a maintenance team, then there is a strategic team, then there is an innovation team, then there is a team looking at the consumer trends and how we are going to meet those. And then comes which solution are you, otherwise the digitalization buzzword, the technology buzzword across the organization, some of it will go waste unless you are very clear about which solution of the business are you resolving. Let me tell you, it's very tough thing to get to the real solution because of the way the organizations are structured. The technology people will understand technology, the business people will understand business, and in the definition of the real solution gets lost in the thing. Last but not the least, I think we should not forget the grey rhino movement. Nothing is over as yet. Second wave has taught us. I think there is a foreseeable crisis that you can again walk into. So it has to be very clear about how and what you are going to do to prepare. I think it's all going to be about rediscover and rerun now onwards.
Okay. Sumit, clearly everyone seems to be pointing out that, and as Mahesh also mentioned, that the boards, I shouldn't say board, it's the plural, the boards may not have lost sight of the bigger picture. Does that mean, given the reality, that technology will have a bigger role to play in ensuring that the workforce is mobile, agile, and ready for tomorrow?
Absolutely. I think without a shadow of doubt, uh, technology, especially to manage the manpower, is going to be significantly, how should I say, enhanced as we move forward. Companies were already investing, but I do see an increased uptick in investments around artificial intelligence, for example. Uh, why am I bringing in AI here? Because because when it comes to managing people, people are not machines who are subject to a very unidirectional mechanism. You can tell a machine what to do and it does that day in, day out, 24/7, 365. A person's behavior changes over a period of time. How can you spot trends, etc., through technology that can help you manage your workforce better, is where AI is moving today when it comes to managing workforce better in organizations. Stretching that a little further, I think there was a lot of comments, and I think some fantastic comments around where workforce of the future is going. There are two broad elements to it in the way we see it as we keep working with our customers. One, clearly, there is this three category of workforces that are coming out, right? There will be a set of workforce who will permanently be at home. Whether some of you will do that or not is another matter. Am I pro that or not is another matter. But there will be a set of workforce that will be permanently at home. There will be a set of workforce that can only work from factory, office, shop floor, etc., right? And then there will be a hybrid workforce. So that is a complexity that is getting created right now. The other complexity that was already brewing, if I may say so, before the pandemic hit us, was this whole thing about diversity of workforce that organizations need to embrace. There are the white collared employees, there are the blue collared employees, then there are the contract employees, then there are the gig employees, there are consultants, right? When we are looking at an organization that has to deliver an end product to a consumer, right? This whole ecosystem of people that I'm talking about are working together to deliver that end product to the consumer. If you have one set of these people unhappy, you will probably have a problem with your end product, right? So what we are seeing is increasingly organizations are also looking at embracing what you might call as unified manpower planning. So there is this different categories of work that is evolving. There's this different categories of workforces that is becoming more and more pronounced. And with the labor code, by the way, coming in, this will have more ramifications. And that's a topic for another panel, I would believe. These two will merge, and the complexity of managing this workforce. And by the way, while these two will merge, the third thing that I think all the panelists talked about is the planning window is becoming shorter and shorter, right? Because of the uncertainty we have in the market, the consumer behavior is changing and so on and so forth. So we have this complexity of workforce, and then we have the planning window shortening, which basically leads us to a direction where the complexity of managing my people will increase. And which is where, to me, digitize, why does a company need to digitize at any point in time? If an X process is extremely easy with no errors and nothing, I will never put technology to it. It's waste of money, correct? So the simple logic behind any digitization is, can I eliminate complexity? Can I eliminate errors? Can I improve productivity? And some of these directions in which workforce and the industry is moving, and manufacturing is going there in that direction too, the way we see it, significantly so, is where technology will play a very, very big role in the future.
Okay, also want to understand, because Dinesh, the touch and feel industry, because in some of those, just if I can, put this question to you, the touch and feel part of the business, how does one ensure that that part is taken care of? And also the word that came about is empathy. How do companies take care of that one particular word?
Yeah, so I think empathy is a subject in itself, and I was speaking to a similar forum sometime back, about a leader having empathy, whether a good leader should be empathetic leader, or is he considered to be a weak leader if he's very empathetic? So I think to me, empathy is an integral part of a good organization or a good leader, right? So you can't separate the two. You have to be empathetic at every point in time. It's not that because of COVID we have become suddenly very empathetic. we may have become more concerned. And maybe the first question we asked today is, how are you doing and how's your family doing, right? Irrespective. But that doesn't mean that we were not empathetic earlier, right? Especially in our case, because it was an acquisition of an Indian company which has been there, for about 50 years, and then we come in and we try to balance a culture of people who have been with the company for 15, 20 years. And then there are a set of people who are just coming into the company from different, from the various multinational companies. And then you have the Japanese, the expats. We had to be careful about that, and I think that empathy is what has worked in enabling a very, very smooth transition which has happened over the last 10 years from an Indian-owned company to a Japanese MNC. And this is especially with the workers, because they and at the lower level, because they were so concerned that with this acquisition, will we have our job or will we lose it? So this assurance that you're there, you're very critical to the company, even if you're not as educated as the other guys who are coming in, you're critical because your experience is very critical. So that's a kind of ethos that we set. So that's addressing the empathy, and I think I owe the success of this company, apart from brand name and products and technology, is largely to a motivated workforce, which is understood over the years that this company looks well after its people. And I guess that's also helped us in during the COVID, because we obviously we didn't push people to go out and achieve their numbers, the sales numbers, or the production numbers, right? Whatever we have done, I think we have done to the best of the ability based on the with the constraints that existed. So if the markets were allowed to open for 4 hours, we made sure that we worked in those 4 hours and delivered material. But all that was, I would say, voluntary. It was. I'm sure that down the line there was pressure. I'm not denying that area managers wouldn't have pushed their people, but prima facie there was no such signals being given from the top. So that's the empathy part. Sorry, Ashutosh, the first part you mentioned was about
changes.
Changes.
I also would like to understand, and from everyone, after the second wave, how are you reimagining your operations as well as workforce model? Because that, it is pretty clear, is changing for tomorrow.
So you want me to...
Yes, please. If I can begin with you. Yeah.
So I think, as everyone is saying, that things like manufacturing, logistics, there's not much change. I mean, except for the fact that you can bring in more automation, and that's what we are doing. So in terms of, when you talk of Industry 4.0, what are we doing? We're basically capturing the information. We're making the decision-making more automated. We're making the decision-making more intelligent, so that it looks at the trends. It looks at the seasonality on its own. It's able to plan and load the machines. All of that is happening. But I think the biggest change which will happen is in the non front-ending functional roles. If I remove sales, if I remove logistics, if I remove manufacturing, all of the other functions, I think that is where I see more of a technology intervention happening. To basically, as I think Sumit mentioned, that whatever processes are standardized, can we reduce the manpower? Can we automate it, right? And make it more measurable, make it more objective. So this is where we will see biggest change, because I think Mahesh made a very beautiful point about the ROC per employee. Now, if today companies are, so mostly companies, look at output per employee or a sales per employee. And we look at ROC at the company level or maybe at the business division level. But if you are able to achieve an ROC per employee, that's an amazing work you can do, right? And this is where perhaps Sumit can help us. Yeah, I think so. That's
okay. Wonderful point, Mahesh. If I can take that same question, so I'd try and ask that question from everyone. After that second wave, as I mentioned earlier, how is your company reimagining operations to make sure that the future can be a little smoother, perhaps? That's what everyone would love.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring in, so there's many perspectives to this, and this can be a topic in itself, but I'm going to bring in a very specific component of technology, right? To say, it has become very, very clear that in an organization like ours, because 90% of our staff has to actually physically work either in the laboratories or on the manufacturing floor doing R&D or manufacturing, we need to be thinking about productivity, we need to be thinking about employee safety, and we need to be thinking about minimum downtime on any activity that we do. And so I'm going to call out, a TED approach, if you will, TED, right? So one is, how can we decrease training time? How can we make training a lot more effective? Whether that is through addressing mindset, and also then that is through addressing specific training areas through use of technology. Second, E is equipment uptime. How do you keep your equipment running most of the time through our approaches where we are now using IoT-based solutions to make sure you understand maintenance requires of your equipment and so on and so forth. And then the third is documentation time. Because we are a documentation-heavy, compliance-heavy environment, how do we make all of those changes also sustainable or manageable so that they're not a burden, but they deliver what you want, right? So I think that those are the kinds of ways for us to look at this specific transition now.
Okay, Abhay, what would be your take on the future, and how do we make it, as I mentioned earlier, smoother than before?
The first aspect is the safety of the employee, so that is paramount. So so we need to bring in technology where we are ensuring that the people are safe by bringing some GPS kind of technology or QR coding and other things. The second is by creating visibility in the whole supply chain, so that we know what to make, how, and when to make, so that proper scheduling could be done. That is the second thing. Third thing is automation, so that with the fewer manpower or with the ease of operations, we are able to manufacture. And fourth, as rightly pointed by Mahesh, that by digitalization of documentation, we need to be future ready.
Okay, Chandrasekhar, your take on this rather wide topic, but something critical for business.
Yeah. So I'm based out of Kerala, Kochi, and as you said, we still are not out of the woods. So we still are continuing with the second wave as we speak. So the challenge still continues for us. So we haven't really gone to the next phase, as I said. But a couple of points. I think what it has done is the continuing phase of this second, which we have been seeing it for a longer period of time. One has definitely impacted people in terms of their not the physical health, but the mental health as well. So I think one of the things which going forward as well might be a need is how do you really work with people in terms of providing tools which could be around support in terms of psychological support, having people coming and counseling them. It could be both the online method for people who are in the office and who can be working from home, and a physical psychological trainer, coach who can come and interact with the people at the shop floor. I see that definitely that's going to be one of the things which maybe will also going forward would be needed if we're going to face these kind of pandemics, or if not pandemics, an epidemic or any of this kind of a distortion which can come in. We definitely would need that to come in. And training, as definitely being mentioned by others as well, will become far more evolving, and also keeping up with the needs of the art, which could be more trained towards what that person, he or she, would be really needing. So micromanaging individuals in terms of their skills would become a very, very critical thing, because you cannot have a broad-based training. It's going to be very specific to that individual. Thirdly, at the manufacturing level, as Mahesh mentioned, IoT would definitely come in more. We would be using it more in terms of tools which can help us to measure and be far more intelligent than what we were in the past.
Okay, here's wishing you the best, Chandrasekhar, for you and your operations, because you need all our good wishes as well. While we continue our discussions, let's just go to Sudhakar. Sudhakar, what would your take be on reimagining tomorrow's operations and workforce? If you can give a brief answer, please.
Yes, I think we should move towards remote monitoring of the real-time data, basically, as far as the manufacturing is concerned. because the data is there, but the data that helps you make better decisions, more profitable decisions, the decisions that make you earn and keep some cash. But apart from automation on the floor and robotics and all that stuff, but I think it's an whole holistic organizational business model that is going to be the successful model in the future. So I think you need to complement that with the right business analytic tools also. Business analysis, automated reports. I think now we need to start investing and getting into the right CRM tools also. Salesforce automation, of course, we're already there, but we need to constantly improve these. The remote working should also make more efficient organization using some of these technological solutions. And I definitely don't think that we will ever need to go to pre-COVID levels. I think we need to think ahead of the COVID curve to create an organization that lasts, learning from the
Right.
experiences, and also ability to see new crisis. It's not going to be over. But I think in terms of automation, if I am able to imagine to do all these things that I mentioned, I think I would feel very comfortable.
Okay, so tech is the way ahead. And it just reminds me of a comment I'd heard from one of the industry leaders, said, well, if Industry 4.0 is being adopted, will the industry give it 10 out of 10? That was the cheeky comment I heard. So Sumit, I'll hand it over for you for a vote of thanks, please. An address, or if I may call it a vote of thanks. You're on mute, Sumit.
Thanks, Ashutosh. And first, thank you so much to the co-panelists for joining us. I think it has been an amazing conversation. I learned a lot. I keep working with a lot of manufacturing organizations, and I'm constantly looking at areas where I can learn and improve. And I think having some of your insights today was absolutely wonderful in terms of where the future of workforce is, especially in the manufacturing sector. Thank you, each and every one of you, for taking the time out. 90 minutes is not small in your roles, so thank you for that. I think as we are moving forward, a couple of things that come to mind basis what the panelists have spoken about. I think we are increasingly looking at higher agility across the board, higher automation. There is no doubt about it. Real-time visibility on the workforce across the board, so that I can be better prepared when it comes to employee safety or production. So I think these are some of the things that I take away from what the panelists mentioned. Once again, thank you so much for joining us here, and thanks Ashutosh for carrying this through.
Okay, thank you so much, Sumit, for your inputs and your address as well, and input from everyone, because this has been a challenge, and listening to everyone on what we are expecting in terms of the way companies will run and how some of the people will be managed in such an environment. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and taking out the time for this conversation with everyone. Thank you indeed for being with us, and look forward to continuing the dialogue on the economic times. And we hope you'll have more to say and more to talk about as well. Thank you indeed for being with us.
Yeah, I think some of these learnings itself can go into a document that can be used for the future. Thank you very much. It's really a good idea to have such a conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.